morning, everyone. Welcome to this exciting episode of Black Beat Podcast. Hi, I'm John Washington, the editor-in-chief of Flossin Media. And look here, we about ready to get hot and dirty around here. Good morning, Harrison. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing all right, bro. What's up with you?
Well, I don't know, man. We got an exciting guest in the house tonight, and we got some different kind of people that is excited about the guest, and the guest is excited about what the guests do.
Guess again.
Well, what the guests do. But guess who? Michelle, how are you doing in here? You're a surprise visit to us today.
Yes, indeed.
Is there some reason why you sitting here smiling? And the fact that you
she gets nervous
about?
She smiles.
Oh, is that what that is? I think that. And
Your fault.
yes, sir. But here today, we got this exciting guest in the house, and I got some exciting jocks in the house with me today on this topic. But Michelle, you want to take a minute and introduce our guest to us today?
Yes. So today we welcome the Executive Director for the New Leaf Project, Jeannette Ward-Horton. NLP's mission is to build intergenerational wealth via the legal cannabis industry for the communities disproportionately harmed by cannabis criminalization. Their programs are designed to increase success outcomes for people of color in the cannabis industry, either as business owners or professionals. She also helps steer and collaborations of community stakeholders and government liaisons to Economic Equity Work Group to present HB 3431, a tax on cannabis across the state of Oregon whose funds would work to shrink the wealth gap, repair harm, and better economic stability for Oregon.
Whoa, welcome, sister.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you is, because I don't see you enough as much as I like to see you. But here we is. We here today, and we talking about weed, right?
We are.
And the money that come from it.
That's right.
Or who should be running from it. So tell us a little bit, Ms. Horton, about what you got going on, sister. Welcome to the house, and tell us a little bit.
Thank you. Well, I could talk about the two things that were in my bio, one of which is what we're doing at New Leaf Project, or New Project. We now have a new name. And that's the work to really help create generational wealth. So I think I'd rather open with the legislative work, which is also about creating generational wealth, but on the scale of the state of Oregon. So when cannabis taxes are legalized, it creates a boon in terms of new tax dollars being collected into the state. The state has predicted $300 billion collected over the next 2 years from cannabis sales just in Oregon. This is a new tax
$300 billion.
That's a big number.
Boy, that is a big number on some weed.
How do you come up with that?
Those are the taxes that will be paid over the next 2 years.
Billion.
Yeah, it's a big number.
For that much weed being grown in Oregon, man, and being sold?
No.
Man, I didn't think it was that many, but I hope, I don't know what I hope, but it sounds like some money.
May I ask where those
From the outside.
May I ask where those taxes are being collected from?
So they're collected from the retailers at the point of sale. So, and really from the consumer. If you buy legal cannabis in the store, you're going to pay a % of taxes. And those taxes roll up to that $300 billion.
So that's all in Oregon?
That's all in Oregon. It's over 2 years, but we're still talking about bees and multiple hundreds of them. So it is pretty mind-boggling.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of revenue being moved,
It is.
when I think about it, because, well, I don't want to reveal all my hand, but being in the business, I ain't never, that's, boy, what I touched was like minuscule. I mean, it was almost like $5 compared to $5 million, But where all this weed at? I mean, is this weed stored somewhere, or is
It's people are smoking it. It's running through the register. This is the cannabis that's been consumed and bought in your dispensary, your local dispensary.
Right, and they're also growing huge. They're growing huge farms here in Oregon, and the potency of weed has gone way up. And ain't that ragweed that you and me used to look at?
Yeah.
Right. So they're huge.
Mexican.
Is that not? You tell me if I'm right.
No, you're
or
right.
wrong.
THC levels on cannabis have increased over time. The breeding has been done of the plants to make it so.
So these dollars, now, generational wealth, I mean, and that's definitely the buzz. I appreciate it. Reparations, restorative justice.
Yep.
And for a lot of those things, I still find it rather difficult to see how those dollars, and one of the things that I am really excited about is your advocacy, along with ours, to be able to somehow or another look at some collective understanding about how we're going to split up, or at least be able to somehow engage in this to get equity
Absolutely.
out of this process. So what's the plan, sis? I mean, how are we going to do this?
Absolutely. So the we is the black community, because the bottom line facts are those on the bottom of the economic spectrum are black people. It is true no matter how you slice this. You're talking about rural communities or urban communities, whether they're degreed or not degreed. When you start to look at black folks, we make less money and we have less wealth than other communities. What's wealth? It's a parent owning a business. It's a house that got passed down from a grandfather, a piece of land that now your siblings are splitting up because someone has passed away. That is what we don't have in the black community. We don't have it because of a legacy of slavery. We don't have it because of a legacy of wealth stripping via the criminal injustice system.
You know, it's crazy when you talk about generational wealth, because, you know, I come from a family, you know, that's kind of odd. You know, I mean, you think that's, well, it's kind of odd, but when it comes to generational wealth, it's real odd, you know, because only part of the family on my mother's side, they have wealth, right? And on my father's side, they was hog farmers, right? And so they all ran away from the South, you know, like they all did, you know, from South Carolina and Georgia. And they came up to the north, right? And they came into Jersey, and they gave birth to 7 kids, and we were all raised up in the projects and this and that. And we didn't know nothing about no generational wealth, even though the foundation of the families had property that they owned and they farmed and they worked and so forth and so on. But we was living in projects, and we didn't have nothing to understand, nothing but selling some weed, you know, and figuring out how we can get a couple of dollars. But it was never a thought about anything about how we was going to be able to transfer any wealth. Yeah. So when my parents died recently, well, they died a while back, but this whole conversation about generational wealth is starting to come up. And it seems like the next generations are starting to pick up on this language and this conversation. And so, but the damages that were caused as a result of drug involvement in our communities, especially in my family, it ran rapid. It just ran through the whole family. Everybody had that X factor, right? But weed was a big part of all of that interaction during that time. So people really got damaged as a result of participating with it. But today we're seeing and hearing this whole legalization language that's going on. But anyway, my younger sister came at me because my mom left a piece of property. And she was talking about, and I'm paying the taxes on this property. Ain't nobody in my family ever thought about doing anything about paying nothing. Every time the bill come, I say, well, everybody should chip in and pay a part of this so you could all participate.
I pay taxes on land in South Carolina.
Well, see there, that's a good thing.
For 20 years.
But you got brothers and sisters, don't you?
I do.
Well,
But
you
I
know.
have cousins as well.
Well,
They live there.
At some point in time, you know, the land had to do something, and somebody had to do something. And so my sister calls me up and talking about how she is looking at, since she has a child and who has now had a child, and she's a grandmother, she came up with a language. This is my youngest sisters, too. She tells me, well, when are we going to do something with that property out there so we can participate in generational wealth? I don't man, drop the phone.
Yeah, but you know, Bubba, at the same time, those folks who have always had generational wealth don't call it generational wealth.
No.
They call it just the family passing on to the folks that's coming behind them. And we have generational wealth because that is what they have had that we have been stripped of for the longest time.
Or never had access to. The legacy of slavery is real.
Right,
working.
but some of us have had, because I'm from the islands of Carolina, and so is he. And we are Gullah Geechee folk.
Yeah, and the point, though, one of the ways we lose wealth is losing property because we can't pay the taxes.
Yeah,
so
that's
you are both speaking to you've held on to this family property because you've been lucky enough to have the income to make that happen.
Absolutely.
So talk us a little bit about the program we got here in front of us now, the Economic Equity Investment Program.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on what you were saying, John, about the language of generational wealth. People are talking about this topic, and I think it's super important.
Right, man.
For our community because I think it's been really hidden. It's been really lack of access to economic opportunity and economic solvency contributes to addiction, contributes to lack of educational success factors, contributes to reincarceration, contributes to health problems in our community. They're very related. It's really the kind of foundational. So it's good that we're talking about this as a community, and good that Black folks are organizing around this. And this bill is Oregon's attempt at what I'm going to call economic reparations.
And that's been one that's coming up on the conversation lately. And I don't, economic equity. You think it's possible, Jeannette, to achieve what we're talking about?
I think the dream of economic equity is one we have to keep out there and keep striving for.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When you mentioned a minute ago about the 2-year, $300 billion, that money has traditionally gone to the industrial prison system.
Right.
To build prisons and other things to put us behind bars for selling $4 or $5 worth of weed, when they're building these prisons to keep us locked away from a whole lot of stuff for years.
Yeah, so the idea is we should get a piece, Black folks, of that $300 billion.
Absolutely. We built this place.
That's right.
Well, on this thing, let's talk a little bit about, I see that you have written here the problem. And Michelle, can you read the problem on this document and talk a little bit about the solution?
Over 4 decades of over-policing and discriminatory policies have exacerbated wealth disparities for Oregon's Black, Indigenous, and Latinx communities. The gap in wealth and health disparities are linked. The correlation between economic fragility and substance abuse are high. In 2020, Black individuals experienced the largest percentage increase in overdose mortality rates, and Native individuals experienced the highest overdose mortality of any group.
Wow. Did you hear that, Harrison?
Absolutely.
And this is a new trend.
Absolutely.
It's a new trend that Black folks are dying more than white folks. This is
a new trend.
It's new.
That we're dying more?
Yes.
I mean, well, Harrison, you can't look at that too crazy. I mean, the fact of the matter is more white folks than there is Black anyway. Yeah. So there's going to be a whole lot more of them dying than us.
Well, it's rates per 100 people, but it's just that there has been a period of time where while we all consumed at the same rates, we were also all had the similar mortality rates, or white mortality rates were higher. So this is a new trend that Black mortality rates are overtaking. And when I say consume, I'm not talking about marijuana. These overdose rates are opioids and crack cocaine and those kinds of things.
Particularly fentanyl.
Yeah.
Today, it's sprinkled on everything. Yeah.
All right, yeah. So, Jeannette, tell us, how did this all get started? How did this all get stood up? I mean, we understood we were fighting the legalization battle. Everybody was in the dance trying to make sure that we was able to legalize it, because as in most cases, I mean, even with technology, the advent of technology, when it came on, we knew that the young white males at about 25 to 35 was riding that train all the way to nirvana, And so every time something new comes up, every time, the white world tends to be able to monopolize on it and get a little bit of a head start down the road. So when we saw this coming down the track, what was it that accelerated or started or activated your movement toward going in this direction?
Yeah.
And how did it all get started?
Well, I'm going to focus on, it feels like it's a long answer, so I'm going to focus on how we got started with this legislative work around cannabis taxes.
Come on with it.
Okay, because that was really 2020, summer of 2020, George Floyd's murder, and there, here in Oregon, there was a lot of noise about that, and it felt like it was a really great opportunity to take that momentum and put it in front of the legislators and say, you've got to do economic justice right now.
Yeah.
And you have an opportunity because of cannabis taxes being new. New York, Illinois, Colorado, and Illinois went so far as to call it reparations, have put money from cannabis taxes to Black communities. So it felt like the moment to hold these legislators accountable, to say these Black Lives Matter signs keep popping up in these yards across Oregon, and I love that. So let's put our money where our mouth is and set aside this growing pool of $300 billion plus to do economic reparations work. And it was a community work group. You were on it, John.
Right.
We had a lot of folks from our community show up, also from the rural community, also from the substance abuse communities. And we had lots of community members on who know what this means.
Right. Ooh. So that sounded like that was some exciting times. I mean, I think all over, what I'm really starting to see is that there's a lot of exchange of wealth being exchanged toward the black community, probably some of the most significant wealth that has been going on in the history of blacks in the state of Oregon. I mean, I'm looking at everybody looking at an economic development plan and strategy that's associated with equity, that is just equity and wealth dispense, and then also generational wealth, the concerns for that. So as we're moving forward now, where are we going with all this, Jeannette? I mean, what's the next move?
Yeah, so the last session, that work group that you really helped us bring forward, we got the program created. So it's an economic equity investment program. That's the name of it. Business Oregon is running it. And I sat on a call yesterday about it, and the manager at Business Oregon said, this is novel, this is new, because it is. Trying to create a state-run program to address the economic wealth gap is new. We don't have anything to model this off of.
Wow.
What we do know is we have to have ongoing funds. A one-time distribution of $15 million is not going to make a dent in what the community needs to measurably change the
Right,
wealth
as
gap.
restorative, when you consider restorative as it being a key indicator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So funding this session, that's the ask.
When you said a minute, Illinois went as far as saying it was reparations. How come Oregon can't do that?
You know, I think it can. I think there's just more power building to be done from the black community. I think it can. We just have to hold them accountable.
All right,
Yeah.
makes sense.
I think so.
There's enough power here.
There is. There really is.
According to Bubba, there's...
We've got a unique moment in the legislature. There are 3 black senators. There are 2, I think, black representatives, and that sounds
yeah,
small, but for
Lou
Oregon, that's
Fredericks.
doing something.
Who's that, Lou Fredericks?
Senator Lou Fredericks, Senator James Manning. And
Oh,
then
yeah,
there's-
James Manning's out of Eugene, right? Yeah.
That's right. A new senator, Senator Aaron Woods. So Senate's a really important place for these bills to pass, and so I think we've got a good political climate.
So what was the intersection between this and the Oregon Cures Act? What was the intersection there?
That's a great question. So Senator Akasha Lawrence Spence, who helped get the Oregon Cares Act passed, was also the champion for this bill the first and second time. The first time we didn't make it, but the second time when we passed. She's been I hope she comes back to serve
Yeah,
us.
I hope so
Part of
too.
CARES Oregon. That's not part of CARES Oregon.
Different. The
It's
Oregon
different.
Cares
The
Act.
Oregon-
Right. She was very instrumental in getting that up on deck.
It might be helpful to explain it. So the CARES
Right.
Act set choose my language carefully. The CARES Act said that we are going to ensure that the percentage of these funds that matches the population percent of black folks in Oregon actually reaches black people.
Yeah.
That's equity.
Yeah, that was fair. That
We're
was a real
saying we're
deal.
going to be
Yeah.
fair and equitable, and that is hard for people to swallow.
There's only 2% in the whole state.
They said we're going to set aside enough to cover. We're going to be equitable. It wasn't, but the idea of I said the word set aside. That's the flaming word. You don't
Yeah,
set
set
aside
aside.
anything
We've been
for
set
anybody.
aside for a long
We've
time.
been set aside for a long time.
But you know what's really fascinating about that is that when you consider the amount of money that they had set aside, it wasn't even enough. It was a minimal
15 million
amount.
she was talking
Yeah, it
about.
was
That was her 15 million, and then there was 63 or 62 that was allotted for the CARES Act, right? Which was the allotment amount. When it looked at the numbers correctly, it was really supposed to be 100 million, but we compromised in that reality and accepted the 63 million. So, but we're constantly always accepting a minimal amount
Right.
to resolve a massive problem,
Right.
And that frame of thinking and way has to stop a
That's
little
right.
bit.
It results in set aside.
Yeah, us being set aside.
Absolutely.
Well, Michelle, what you got on your mind?
Well, I was going to ask you about given the circumstances, what do you think it was that led to the Oregon Cares Fund being sued?
What I've been told is that there are conservative watch groups who look for potential lawsuits that they can bring around the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment in the Constitution is meant to end discrimination, and what it did
Ended
is
slavery is what it did.
the 14th.
Yes.
Was that what was also
13th
in
and the 14th.
Okay,
Yeah.
so whatever language is in the 14th around non-discriminatory policies and practices means that if you create a program where you say we've got to focus on a priority population. Depending on how you frame that, you might get sued, and you might get sued anyway, no matter how you frame it, because that's what these people have a lot of money to do. Go create trouble. And just the threat of a lawsuit makes it difficult to do this work. So they're effective in their racist practices. Just the threat of a lawsuit is enough to get scared folks to say, nah, we're just not going to touch this.
So what do you think is going to, do you think that there's a risk that this could come about, over this legislation as well?
I don't. I think we're being smart. I think we're being, I think we're showing the value that this has for all Oregonians.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Michelle, there was another part of that suit, too. There was 3 suits that were actually brought.
Wow.
And one was the one that we're speaking of now, but one is not being really spoke about. It was a community member that was a Hispanic woman who, for some odd reason, felt that there was an injustice in blacks receiving these funds also, because she felt like her business wasn't being supported or whatever. So,
I hate when that happens. I'm not going to her cafe anymore, by the way.
me and you both. I mean, it's kind of like, but I think that we're setting the stage not only for, we're setting the stage for this kind of conflict to come in a lot of different other areas as we move down the road. I think I'm not necessarily, and I speak to a lot of black men about this, and I don't necessarily think none of us are comfortable with the way the state of the land is now around this equity and diversity reality, because we're just not getting the benefit of the doubt of it. It's not, it appears. And this is the conversation. And I'm hoping in the future we're going to open up a podcast to this dialogue because I think it's really important that we begin to take a look at how things are being orchestrated to be able to arrive us continuously at this state of disparity. And so I think that this plan that Ms. Horton and her organization is really proposing is one of those cutting-edge new step plans and ways of being able to address some of the disparities and problems that we're having in our community. So right on, sister. I'm really excited about where we're going with all this.
Absolutely.
And I can't read my editor most of the time. I'm gonna get cue cards to put up someplace one of these days.
One of the things that people overlook, like when you talk about the lady who also brought suit, is that there's a whole lot of anti-marijuana folks all throughout the state, and they're willing to go to any length to fight what you're doing. And I think to be aware of that is really, really, really important, because everybody doesn't, especially the field that I work in is addiction. A lot of people that work in addiction have never been into legalization because as far as they're concerned, everything is about being an addict.
Right.
And most people aren't. That kind of thing. So it's just something to be aware of more than anything else.
So Jeannette, where are we going from here? What's the next steps? And I think it's important that for people to recognize, how do people get involved with this? I mean, because we're going to constantly need advocacy and support to be able to continue to move this agenda. And I don't think, we didn't talk a little bit about, was there an allotment of $15 million? And is that money on the vine? Is it in your pocket? Where is it at?
That's a great question. Yes, there was an allotment. And yesterday I learned that 87 organizations have submitted applications. I hope you guys submitted one.
Well, yeah.
Yay.
Yeah, there you go. Let's keep submitting everywhere we can.
Thank goodness. You all serve the black community. So,
yes, we do.
So what I want to understand is how many of these 87 are serving the communities that's at the economic bottom, which is the black community. We can't say race. We can't talk about race. Okay, let's just talk about who's at the economic bottom. We're still talking about the black
And it's
community.
a no-brainer, and I do appreciate that, sis. And as much as I want to advocate for all these other issues and things that are in the equity box, again, I still believe that it's been said to me that we support the lesser amongst us.
Absolutely.
And I don't think it's really hard to identify what is the lesser amongst us. Who's catching, because most, excuse the expression, shit rolls downhill, and I don't know who y'all think is at the bottom of the hill, but we've been catching shit for a good while.
Shit sandwiches don't taste.
Just don't taste it. Shit cakes ain't doing very well. So anyway, But sister, how do people reach you and your organization?
So I would love to put some links up on y'all's website.
Yeah,
so we
come
can
on
put
with it.
links up for New Project as well as for the Equity Investment PAC. And then, people think local government is so important to get involved in, and folks think it's hard. It's really easy. A letter to your legislator makes a big difference. A quick letter. Showing up at Salem is easy and scares the bejesus out of them. So I think the more we can show up and be present and let them not forget and be blind to who's at the bottom of the hill.
Right.
Yes.
We're a bottom-up organization.
Yes.
People down here are the ones that we're more concerned about.
No.
Y'all are. I know
And
y'all are.
I don't know if we're going to be smoking our way to the top of the hill, but
I'll be. That'll drive
we'll
me.
be. Go to the stove. You're the black stove. Hey, y'all, look, we appreciate Jeannette coming out. And Ms. Horton, tell me this, I would be remiss just because I know, as you know, these shorts are kind of an interesting plan, but what is it that you would like to tell our listeners and our readers? Did I miss asking you a question that you would like to share with them that I think is significant and important for them to hear through you?
Yeah, the only thing I would also add is I know people are very interested in the cannabis industry. How could I join the cannabis industry? And I think, I would say carefully, if you want to own a business, let's have that conversation first. Have that conversation with the Soul District and see if a cannabis business makes sense. But we do help people who own cannabis businesses who are black, brown, women, scale and grow. So that's what New Project does. We're here to be a support system there. But really, it's about building that generational wealth through business ownership. Is that cannabis business? Is that a McDonald's? Is that a barber shop? All those things.
Yeah, truly starting the whole essence of the thought about business as a form of liberation should be a thought that's sold continuously. I mean, we don't like to, we exist in capitalism, and I find that most of the time we are so caught up in socialist conversation. And I'm not a Republican, y'all, so so I don't mean to sound like that, but the bottom line is, freedom is in the land of milk and honey. It ain't a damn thing funny but money. And I'm here to tell you, in order for us to have that sense of liberation in ourselves, people must consider the independence that they have in this country about business ownership and their ability to control their destiny and their lives.
That's right. It creates a level of economic independence, self-determination, self-control, and power that other communities have that we don't have.
Right?
Yes, sir, Rita Bob. It was a great afternoon. Good morning. Goodbye. But this was one of those types of conversations I always look forward to. Ms. Horton, you're always welcome to come back into the studio and chop it up with us about this topic and about this issue. Because, folks, if you don't know nothing about generational wealth, and if you don't know nothing about establishing your own business or your own sense of independence in this land of milk and honey, you're funny. You got a problem. You got some issues. But the rest of that, y'all, listen, we want y'all to just keep listening to what we got to bring you because we're going to keep bringing you some exciting information and exciting news. So y'all have a great afternoon.
Hello.
And this is where we come to it. Hey, Michelle, you present. What you doing? How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been great to be a part. And thank
Harrison,
you so much
we
for your
on-
work. I really appreciate your work, Jeanette.
Thank you.
Always nice to hear people that know what they're talking about. That's always important. Absolutely.
You hear
I
that?
appreciate that compliment. Thank
Yes.
you.
Hey,
Thank you.
sister, you always welcome to come around here with my house. Your
I'll be
house.
over. I'm just
Come
going to
on.
show up. This is walking distance to my
Get
kitchen.
see, oh,
I'm just
girl,
gonna knock.
really?
Yeah, you can come hang out.
Okay.
Come on, hang out.
Okay.
I'd like to see you in the studio again. Hey, y'all, thank y'all again. It's a wrap.